I'm very grateful to Noah Hamouzi and also Suad Adnan for all of the time they've spent organizing this conference. They've been delightful to work with, wonderful hosts. I was lucky enough to make a preliminary visit here to Morocco last year, and they couldn't have been more courteous and kind, not only in working together to arrange this conference, but also giving me a sightseeing tour here in Rabat and directing me for my trip to Marrakesh, which was my first trip to Morocco. So we're thrilled to be here, and thank you very much for all the careful organization you've done, and also for getting such a great audience as well. I'm grateful too to Tom Palmer from the Atlas Foundation, who's here with us today and is another sponsor of the center and of this conference. We also have Peter Gettler in the audience here at the front, who's a board member of the Atlas Foundation and is also a great supporter of Monticello. It should be said Monticello is a private foundation. It's not a government organization, which is nice. It means we have much independence. The house itself is something of an icon. It appears on every 5-cent coin, known as the nickel in America, where you'll see the profile of the house on one side, and on the other side of the 5-cent coin is the relief of a bust of Thomas Jefferson. The foundation is unusual because it largely exists, of course, to support a historic house. It relies mostly on income from visitors and the tickets, but also from private donations. But what is unusual is that it devotes remarkable resources to research and scholarship, to both work about Jefferson, but also to promoting knowledge of Jefferson's ideas. The majority of our conferences are historical. So typically we are doing conferences specifically about Jefferson. But we also do conferences like this. And Leslie mentioned that we most recently been in China, Cuba, Russia, but also places like Australia, Germany, France, and Britain. And these conferences have dealt with subjects like this, where we're looking at contemporary issues and not simply at Jefferson. Indeed, we want to promote a dialogue, and we want to have subjects that are of interest and relevant to our host nations. We also do conferences as well at Monticello. We have a marvelous new conference center where we've hosted the Atlas Foundation. The conference center overlooks Monticello. It's on a higher mountain, and we introduced it about 4 years ago, and we hope to be doing many more of our own domestic conferences. In addition, we have a library for Jefferson studies in what is like a mini campus known as the Robert H. Smith International Center for Jefferson Studies. That's on the land of Jefferson, very close to Monticello. It's also headquartered in a house where Franklin Roosevelt, the American president, visited regularly during the Second World War. Roosevelt's chief of staff, Pa Watson, lived in the house, and Roosevelt was there for the 4 days leading up to D-Day, which was, of course, the period of the Allied attack on Nazi Europe. The association with Roosevelt's quite important. It was Roosevelt who put Jefferson on the nickel. Most of the major American presidents have invoked Jefferson, whether it be Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, more recently presidents including Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton began his inaugural at Monticello and spent the morning at Monticello before being sworn in for his presidency in Washington. In fact, Clinton's middle name is Jefferson. We also do fellowships, and these may be of interest to some members of the audience. These will fund people to come to the United States to use our facilities at the center. We're located very close to the University of Virginia, which is another wonderful resource. There is at least one Moroccan professor at the University of Virginia who's taken a great interest in this conference. So if anyone would be interested in the fellowship program, you can look on our website at monticello.org, which is listed in the program, but please feel free to speak to me as well. We have an archaeology department, which is one of the leading archaeology departments in the country. I'm always surprised because I regard archaeologists as much more geekish and scientific than historians, and yet each archaeologist used their own system of labeling artifacts. And our archaeology department introduced a system of common labeling in order that we can do comparative archaeology of primarily plantation sites in the American South, but also in the Caribbean. And we can see what is unique and what is typical about the plantation at Monticello. And in addition, we have our own publication program, and we have our own historians on site. We have an advisory board of leading historians, a number of whom are with me today. Annette Gordon-Reed, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner based at Harvard University and who opened our visitor center at Monticello. Peter Onuf, who recently retired as the Thomas Jefferson Foundation professor at the University of Virginia, but he's remained in Charlottesville and is now the senior fellow at the Robert H. Smith International Center for Jefferson Studies. And Frank Cogliano, who teaches at the University of Edinburgh, but he and I have had a reverse careers. I was born in Britain, but have taught most of my career in the United States. Frank was born in the United States. He was, in fact, supervised for his doctoral thesis by Alan Taylor, who has just won a second Pulitzer Prize and is replacing Peter Onuf at the University of Virginia, and will almost certainly be part of many of our other conferences that we intend to do in future. Frank has just completed a book on Jefferson's foreign policy, and I suspect many of you know that the very first treaty of friendship signed after the Revolutionary War in America was with Morocco. And I think he'll be talking about that later. We did do a conference in Prague, which was about the separation of church and state. And we were largely talking about it in terms of the Middle East and in terms of Eastern Europe. These conferences, we often provide a historical context, which is why we bring historians with us. But in the course of this conference, the consensus of most of the participants was that the separation of church and state has little applicability outside of America. It's almost unique to America, although France would be another example, although a very different example of the separation of church and state. It's obviously an issue which every country is going to have to deal with because of having large numbers of religious minorities. But they thought that the most useful concept was natural rights, that this was of interest to all countries, and it would include freedom of religion. I'm glad Noah said we need to define this term, because every country has a different understanding of rights. In Britain, nobody likes the idea of identity cards, and yet in the United States, you have your Social Security card. In much of continental Europe, you have identity cards. In America, the right of gun ownership is still regarded as very important, although the majority of the population, interestingly, believe at least in limitations on gun ownership. But virtually no other democracy puts emphasis on a right to gun ownership. So rights are always going to be specific in some ways, although there may be some universal rights to different countries. We've combined the word revolution and rights, but it is worth pointing out, as one of our colleagues at Harvard, David Armitage, points out, that most revolutions are also civil wars. And that this was true of the American Revolution. Some 19,000 Americans fought for the British. 70,000 Americans left America during and after the Revolutionary War and moved to other parts of the British Empire. I've always been an admirer of Edmund Burke, who was somewhat anti-revolution, and instead emphasized trying to reform a country from within and trying to adapt the country's existing structure to new ideas rather than wholesale revolution. So I just throw that out as a possible thought. But we're thrilled to be here. We're very much looking forward to the various contributions, and we're very grateful again to you, Noah, and to Suad for all your organization. Thank you.